I have spent the last 4 months trying to figure out how to tell this story. Not because I don't know what happened. I know exactly what happened. I know the sequence, the conversations, the specific afternoon when everything changed. I have gone over it enough times that it has worn grooves in the inside of my head, the way a path gets worn through a field when people keep walking the same line. The problem is that telling it requires me to explain the 19 years before it. And explaining 19 years is harder than telling you about a 4-hour drive to a town I had never been to, where I knocked on a door I had no right to knock on, to see a woman who had not asked to see me. But let me start with the letter. That's where it actually began. It was a Thursday in March. I had been retired for 2 years, which means I was still figuring out what to do with Thursdays. I had a dentist appointment in the morning and came home to find 3 things in the mailbox. A furniture catalog I had been trying to unsubscribe from for 9 months, a water bill, and a white envelope with my name and address written in pencil in the careful, deliberate handwriting of a child. There was no return name on the envelope, just an address in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, a town about 4 hours south of me. I stood in my driveway and looked at it for a while. My neighbor Dennis was raking leaves across the street and waved at me. I waved back and went inside. I did not open the envelope right away. I put it on the kitchen counter next to the legal pad I keep there, the one with 47 first names on it, and I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table and looked at it from across the room. When you have been a child welfare caseworker for 28 years, you develop a specific quality of dread about things that are not quite what they seem. An envelope in a child's handwriting with no return name is one of those things. I opened it. Inside was 1 page, written on notebook paper, the kind with the wide rule and the red margin line. The writing was small and careful. No crossed out words. This child had written a draft before writing this. And inside the notebook paper, folded separately, a photograph. I looked at the photograph before I read the letter. 2 people at what looked like a county fair. The Ferris wheel was in the background. The younger person was a girl of about 9, holding a stick of pink cotton candy, squinting into the sun, grinning. The older person had her arm around the girl and was also squinting, laughing at something. The kind of laugh that catches you mid-sentence and you can't stop it. I looked at this photograph for a long time. Then I read the letter. The letter was from a boy named Wyatt. He said he was 11 years old. He said he had found my name and address in a shoebox in his mother's closet, along with some pictures and letters, and he had looked me up and confirmed I was still at the same address, which meant he had also done some research. He said his mother was not doing so good and that sometimes they ran out of food before the end of the month, and that she sleeps a lot and sometimes can't wake up right away. He said he was telling me this because he didn't know who else to tell, and because in one of the letters in the box it said I used to help kids who needed help. He signed it, Wyatt Boone. He said his mother was Callie Boone. He said he hoped I didn't mind him writing. Callie Boone. My daughter's name before she was Callie Harmon. I had not spoken to her in any meaningful way in 19 years. And I had just learned, from a letter written in pencil on notebook paper by an 11-year-old who walked to the post office by himself on a Saturday morning, that I had a grandson I had never met. I sat at the kitchen table with the letter and the photograph for a very long time. I read the letter 14 times over 2 days. I went to bed both nights and lay there and stared at the ceiling and thought about a number of things I'm going to tell you about. On the morning of the 3rd day, Dennis knocked on my door to ask if I was going to be away because he hadn't seen me outside, and he was willing to water my plants. I told him I wasn't sure how long I'd be. I drove the 4 hours without telling anyone where I was going. I need to tell you some things about myself before I tell you what I found in Elizabethtown. I was a child welfare caseworker for 28 years in Kentucky. My actual title changed several times over those years. The agency restructured, the language shifted, the forms changed, but the work was the same. I went into homes where children were not safe. I assessed what I saw, and when I had enough documentation and enough certainty, I helped the children get out. 47 times in 28 years, I was the person who removed a child from a home. I keep their names on a legal pad on my kitchen counter. Not their full names, just first names. I started the list in 1991 after the second removal I was involved in, because the first one had already started to blur in my memory and that seemed wrong. Their names should be in a specific place, not in a file somewhere, not in an agency database I no longer have access to, but on a piece of paper in my own home where I can see them. The list is 47 names long. The first name is Deshawn. The last name until recently was a girl named Savannah. Most of them I have lost track of. A few I've heard about over the years: a birthday card once, a Facebook message, a former colleague who mentioned one of them in passing. The rest I don't know, and probably never will. I tell you this because I want you to understand what I mean when I say that I spent 28 years learning to see things that people were trying not to show me. I tell you this also because the irony of what happened with Callie is not lost on me. I was a professional at recognizing when a child was in an unsafe situation. I spent my entire career being the person who noticed, and I missed my own daughter. Or I didn't miss it. That's the honest version. I saw it and I didn't know what to do about it. And eventually I did nothing, and the nothing lasted 19 years. Let me tell you about Callie. She was born when I was 24. Her father, Earl, and I were young and in love and had no idea yet what that would cost us. We were good parents, I think. I am still not entirely sure what good parents means. We were present. We showed up. We loved her in ways that were sometimes effective and sometimes weren't, and we tried to understand who she was becoming even when who she was becoming frightened us. Callie was a difficult teenager. Not in the dramatic television movie way, not in the running away from home, getting arrested way. She was difficult in the specific way of a very intelligent person who believes the world has not organized itself correctly and that the adults around her are complicit in this. She was angry in the way that some teenagers are angry, and the anger had a quality of being right about things, which made it harder to address without dismissing what was true in it. Earl and I divorced when Callie was 21. It was not a dramatic divorce. It was the quiet kind where two people realize that what they had built together had been complete for a long time, and that they had just been living in it. Callie had already been on her own for 2 years by then, living in Cincinnati and working at a restaurant and calling every few weeks when she felt like it. The thing that ended our relationship happened when she was 23. I am not going to go into full detail here because it involves things that were said that cannot be unsaid, and because the full story includes my failures as much as hers, and because the point is not to assign blame. The point is that after that conversation, she stopped calling, and after a while I stopped waiting for her to call, and the years accumulated. She had a car accident when she was 27. I found out from a cousin of Earl's who still kept in touch with her. The accident was serious, a herniated disc, a long recovery, a prescription for the pain that she was given by a doctor who, like many doctors at that time, did not fully understand what he was prescribing. By the time anyone understood what OxyContin was doing to people across Kentucky and Tennessee and West Virginia and Ohio, it had already been doing it for years. I don't know at what point Callie's prescription became something else. I know it did. I know that from the letter, and from what I would find in Elizabethtown, and from conversations that happened after. The point is that for 19 years, I had a daughter who was struggling, and I knew it in the way you know things you haven't been told, a sense, a wait, a not asking, because you're afraid of the answer, and I did not go to her, and she did not come to me. And then her 11-year-old son wrote me a letter in pencil and walked it to the post office. I have spent 4 months thinking about what it says about me that it took that to make me move. The drive to Elizabethtown is 4 hours and 12 minutes from my house in Louisville, on a good day without traffic. I left at 7 in the morning on a Wednesday. I had packed a bag because I didn't know whether I would be coming back the same day or not, which told me something about what I was expecting to find. I had not called ahead. I had thought about it and decided against it. If I called, Callie would have the option to tell me not to come, and I was not at that point willing to accept that option. I want to say something about those 4 hours because people have asked me since then what I was thinking on the drive. The honest answer is that I was doing the thing I always did in 28 years of this work. When I was driving toward a situation I didn't have full information about, I was keeping my mind in a specific kind of neutral. Not calm exactly, neutral. Observational. The state where you can take in information when you get there without your prior assumptions already filling in the spaces. It is a professional skill. It is also, I have come to understand, a way of not feeling things that need to be felt. The address Wyatt had given me was an apartment complex in the eastern part of Elizabethtown, near what had once been a shopping center that was now mostly empty storefronts. The building was a 2-story brick structure that had been built in approximately 1985 and had received minimal maintenance since then. The parking lot had a pothole in it that had been filled with gravel and had then become a pothole again. There was a bicycle locked to the stair railing on the second floor. I parked. I sat in the car for about 3 minutes. Then I went up the stairs. The apartment was 2C. I knocked. There was a long silence. Then the sound of movement inside. Then a voice, muffled, saying something I couldn't make out. Then the door opened. She looked at me the way you look at something you were not prepared to see. Her hand was on the door frame. I looked at her. 19 years is a long time. Callie was 38. She had the same eyes hazel, with the slight downward tilt at the outer corners that she got from Earl, and that I always thought was beautiful. Her hair was shorter. She was thinner than I would have expected, in a way that had nothing to do with health. She said, "How did you know where I lived?" "Wyatt wrote to me," I said. Something moved across her face. A series of things, actually, too fast to name individually. She looked past me toward the parking lot as if expecting someone else, then back at me. "He shouldn't have done that," she said. "Maybe not," I said. "Can I come in?" There was a pause. "Why?" she said. I looked at her. I said, "I drove 4 hours. I'd like to sit down." Another pause. Then she stepped back from the door. The apartment was small, a living room, a kitchen open to it, 2 doors leading to what I assumed were the bedrooms. It was not in crisis. I want to be specific about that. It was not in the kind of disarray that signals immediate danger, the kind I had been trained to read. It was in the kind of disarray that signals a person who is managing, but barely. There were dishes in the sink that were not dirty but had not been put away. The trash needed to be taken out. There was a textbook on the kitchen table, a 7th grade science book, with a permission slip folded inside it. The permission slip caught my eye because it had not been signed. Callie sat down on the couch. She was wearing the clothes of someone who had dressed quickly, which may have been because she had dressed quickly. I sat in the armchair across from her. For a moment, neither of us said anything. This was the first time we had been in the same room in 19 years, and the air between us had the specific quality of something that has been held in one shape for a very long time. "He's at school," she said finally. "He doesn't know you're here." "He wrote me a letter," I said. "He was worried about you." "He's 11, she said. "He worries about things he doesn't need to worry about." I looked at the permission slip on the table. I said, "When did you last leave the apartment?" She looked at me with the expression of someone who has been asked a question by a professional and knows it. "I'm not your case, Mom," she said. "No," I said, "you're not." "I'm fine," she said. "We're fine. Wyatt shouldn't have written to you. He knew I didn't want." She stopped. "Didn't want what?" I said. She looked at the window. "You involved," she said. I sat with that for a moment. "I understand," I said. And I did understand. I understood very specifically what it meant that she didn't want me involved. I understood it from 28 years of sitting in rooms with people who had good reasons not to want the system involved, even when the system was the only thing between their children and something worse. I stayed for 2 hours. I did not make any calls. I did not open any cabinets to check the food supply, though I noticed what was visible from where I sat. I did not ask about the prescription bottles I could see on the kitchen counter from across the room. I sat in the armchair and talked to my daughter about things that did not matter: the drive down, the town, a coffee shop I had passed on the main road that had a sign in the window for homemade pie, and she talked back, cautiously, in the way of someone who is testing whether a thing is safe before putting weight on it. At 2:15, the door opened and a boy came in. He was 11. He had Callie's hazel eyes and his father's jaw, whoever his father was. He was wearing a backpack and a gray hoodie, and he was clearly surprised to find anyone in the living room, and then he saw me, and something crossed his face that I recognized from a long time ago. The look of a person who has done something they are not sure was right and is now finding out the result. "Hi," he said. "Hi, Wyatt," I said. "I'm your grandmother." He looked at his mother. Callie said, "Take your shoes off before you come in." He took his shoes off. He put his backpack down on the chair by the door. He sat on the couch next to Callie, and she put her arm around him without looking at him, the automatic way parents do, and he leaned against her. We sat there for a moment, the 3 of us. Then Wyatt said, "Did you come because of the letter?" "Yes," I said. "I'm sorry if I wasn't supposed to," he said. He said this to the room, not to either of us specifically. "You did the right thing," I said. Callie's arm tightened slightly around him. I stayed for another hour. When I left, I told Callie I was going to get a room for the night and that I would like to come back in the morning. She didn't say yes. She also didn't say no. She walked me to the door and stood in the hallway and said, "He's a good kid." "I can see that," I said. She nodded. She closed the door. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes. Then I drove to the Motel 6 on the main road and got a room and called no one, and lay on the bed and looked at the ceiling until it was late enough to sleep. In the morning, I went to the grocery store. I bought things that would last: oatmeal, canned soup, pasta, rice, 2 jars of peanut butter, a jar of honey, a bag of apples, 2 boxes of granola bars. I also bought a box of the specific granola bars that have the thick chocolate coating on the bottom, which are not the most nutritious option, but which I have found in 28 years of bringing food to children in difficult situations are the ones that get eaten. I drove to the apartment. I knocked. Callie answered. She was dressed this time, her hair combed, the apartment slightly tidier. She looked at the grocery bags. She said, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," I said. She let me in. I put the groceries in the kitchen while she stood in the doorway watching me. We did not talk much while I was doing it. She showed me where things went. When I was done, she made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table with the unsigned permission slip, which was still there. She had not thrown it away. We talked for the first real time in 19 years. Not about everything, not about the conversation that ended things, or about what the years between had contained, but about real things, about what happened after the accident, about the prescription, about the part she could and could not control, about Wyatt's father, about the last year, about what the last year was like from the inside. She told me things that were hard to hear, not because they were worse than I had imagined, but because they were so specific. The specific texture of a thing that has been unnamed for a long time is different from the general shape of it that you carry in your worry. I listened. I did not take notes. I did not assess, or at least I tried not to, though the assessment instinct in a person with 28 years of this work does not fully switch off. At one point, she looked at me across the table and said, "You're doing that thing where you're listening like it's work." I said, "I know, I'm trying not to." "You can just talk to me like I'm your daughter," she said. I didn't say anything to that for a moment. Then I said, "I know how to do that too. I'm sorry if it's harder to show." She looked at her coffee. We stayed there for a while. The kitchen smelled like the coffee and like the cold coming through the window she kept slightly open, and the light was the kind of gray-white March light that makes everything look like it's waiting. I had been in Elizabethtown for 3 days when my phone rang, and it was a woman named Miss Lorena Grimes, who identified herself as the school counselor at Hardin County Middle School. She spoke quickly, in the way of someone who talks fast when she is worried. She said she had been watching Wyatt for several months and had filed a welfare report 2 weeks ago. She said she was calling me because Wyatt had listed me as an emergency contact on a form he had filled out himself at the beginning of the school year, which I had not known, which told me something about what Wyatt had been planning or hoping for longer than I had realized. She said the report was already in process. She said there would be a home visit from a caseworker in the coming week. She said she thought I should know. I thanked her. I hung up. I sat in my motel room for about 20 minutes. Then I went back to the apartment. Wyatt was at school. Callie was home. I told her what Miss Grimes had told me. The response was not what I would have predicted if I'd tried to predict it. She didn't cry. She didn't get angry at the school, or at Miss Grimes, or at Wyatt. She sat very still on the couch and looked at the floor. After a while, she said, "I knew something like this was coming." "What do you mean?" I said. "I mean, I've been watching it come," she said. "For about 6 months. I keep meaning to do something about it. And then the day gets like the day gets. And then it's the next week." I looked at her. "There's a program at Baptist Health," I said. "Here in Elizabethtown. I looked it up 2 days ago. Outpatient to start. You'd be able to." "I know about the program," she said. "You've looked into it." "I've looked into a lot of things," she said. "Looking into something and doing something about it are different." "I know," I said. "Do you?" She looked at me now. The first time she had looked directly at me since I had started talking. "You've had a daughter who was struggling for a very long time, Mom. And you looked into it from Louisville. You looked into it really thoroughly from 4 hours away for 19 years. There it was. I did not argue with her. There was nothing in that sentence that was factually incorrect. I said, "You're right." She looked back at the floor. We sat in silence for a while. The kitchen light hummed. Through the wall, I could hear a television in the next apartment. Then I said, "I'm not here to make up for 19 years. I don't think that's possible, and I'm not going to pretend it is. I'm here because a boy who doesn't know me wrote me a letter and told me the truth, and I'm trying to be the person who does something with the truth when she receives it." Callie was quiet. "He's been managing everything," she said finally. Her voice was different, lower. "He makes his own lunch. He makes sure I eat. He wakes me up." She stopped. "He's 11. "I know," I said. "That's not," she closed her eyes briefly. "That's not what I wanted for him." "I know," I said again. We sat with that for a moment. Then the door opened. Wyatt came in from school. He saw us both on the couch, the specific quality of the air between us, and he stopped in the doorway. He looked at his mother, then at me, then at his mother again. Are you guys fighting? He said. No, Callie said. We're talking, I said. He came in. He took off his backpack and his shoes in the right order, the way he always did, and set them down. He went to the kitchen and got a glass of water. He came back and stood in the doorway to the living room with his glass of water. He said, Mom, Miss Grimes called you, didn't she? It wasn't a question. Callie looked at him. I told her to wait, he said. I told her I was writing a letter to Grandma, and she said okay, but she couldn't wait forever. He said this very matter-of-factly, the way you say things that have been thought through in advance. I didn't know how long the mail would take. Neither of us said anything. I wasn't going to let them take you somewhere without someone in the family knowing first, he said to Callie. His voice was still steady. I wasn't going to let that happen to us. The room was very quiet. Callie put her hand over her mouth. I looked at the boy in the doorway, holding a glass of water, 11 years old, who had been managing this situation with more competence and more care than most adults I have known professionally. He looked at me. Will you stay? He said, while she gets help, just so I don't have to go somewhere I don't know. I said, yes. Callie made a sound that wasn't quite a word. I looked at her. She was looking at her son. Her eyes were full in the way of someone who has been holding something back for a long time and has run out of space to hold it. She said, okay, just that. Okay. I called the Baptist Health Program that evening. I made the appointment for the following Monday. I called no one else that night. I want to stop here and say something that the narrative version of this story doesn't quite say. I have been asked, since all of this happened, whether I think I did the right thing by staying away from Callie for 19 years. The question is usually asked with the implicit expectation that the answer is no, that Wyatt's letter proves the wrongness of the distance, that arriving finally and seeing what had accumulated proves that I should have arrived sooner. I don't think it's that simple. The relationship between me and Callie was not simply a daughter who needed her mother and a mother who withheld herself out of pride. The relationship was, for years, actively harmful. The conversation that ended things, the one I didn't describe in detail earlier, was not a misunderstanding. It was a thing said and a thing done and a thing that could not be undone. In the years that followed, when she didn't reach out and I didn't reach out, those years were not only the failure they now appear to be. They were also two people trying to survive something they didn't know how to survive together. I am saying this not to excuse myself. I am saying it because I think the popular version of this kind of story, the one where the estranged parent shows up and everything softens and the child is saved and the family is healed, is not quite honest. Distance between people who have hurt each other is not only cowardice. Sometimes it is the only available form of protection. What I do believe is this. Wyatt's letter found me in a moment when I was ready to receive it. I don't know if I would have been ready 5 years earlier. I know I was not ready 15 years earlier. The readiness is not a virtue I can take credit for. It was just there, in March, in a retired woman with too much time on her Thursdays and 47 names on a legal pad. And I think about Wyatt writing that letter. A boy who had been managing an adult situation with adult competence, who had made a plan, who had coordinated with a school counselor, who had found an address in a shoebox and looked up whether the person still lived there, who had walked to the post office by himself on a Saturday morning. This boy was not waiting to be rescued. He was organizing his own rescue. He just needed one person on the outside to show up. I have thought a lot about what his letter says about the children I knew in my career, the 47 names. How many of them were doing exactly what Wyatt did, in their own way, in their own time, with their own limited resources? How many of them sent signals that someone finally read and acted on? And how many of them sent signals that went unread or were read too late? I also think about what it says that it took an 11-year-old's handwritten letter to make me go to my daughter. I had driven past her last known address twice. I had not stopped. I had not called. I had kept the distance because the distance felt like a decision I had made with good reasons, and I did not want to revisit the reasons, because revisiting them would have required me to sit with what they had cost. Professional training is a useful thing. It is also, I now understand, one of the most effective ways a person can refuse to feel something without knowing they are refusing. I spent 28 years as a person who helped other people's children. I am still figuring out what I failed to do for my own. Callie started the outpatient program at Baptist Health the following Monday. I drove her there and waited in the parking lot with Wyatt, and we ate granola bars, the kind with the thick chocolate coating, and he told me about the science project he was behind on, and I told him I would help him catch up, which was a rash promise given that I have not retained a great deal of 7th grade science. But I made it, and I intend to keep it. The caseworker visit from the state happened the following week. I was present. The caseworker was a woman named Denise, approximately my age, with the look of someone who has done this work long enough to recognize the difference between a family in crisis and a family in the process of addressing one. She spoke with Callie, spoke with Wyatt, reviewed the environment. She documented that a support plan was in place and that treatment had begun. She said she would follow up in 30 days. I know how these visits go. I know what they mean and what they don't mean. I also know that Denise was good at her job and that her assessment was accurate. The family was in the process of addressing something. That is different from being safe, and it is also different from being in crisis. It is the in-between, which is where most of the real work happens. Wyatt came to stay with me in Louisville during the first 2 weeks of Callie's most intensive part of the program, when she needed to focus without the additional responsibility of daily parenting. I had not anticipated having an 11-year-old in my house, and he had not anticipated being in my house, and we proceeded on the basis of mutual good faith and a shared appreciation for oatmeal with honey, which it turned out we both preferred. He is a particular child. Precise about things that matter to him, he straightens things on counters, he closes cabinet doors all the way, he puts things back in the place he found them. I watched him do these things in my kitchen, and I recognized them. I knew what they meant from 28 years of watching children manage environments they couldn't control. I didn't say anything about it. He knew what they meant too. We just let it be what it was. He found the legal pad on my kitchen counter. He looked at it for a while without touching it. "Are these names?" he said. "Yes," I said. "Kids, you helped?" "Yes." He looked at it for another moment. "There's 47, he said. He had counted them. "Yes," I said. He nodded and walked away. He didn't ask what had happened to them or whether they were okay. He understood, I think, that those were questions without clean answers, and he was a child who had learned not to ask questions without clean answers. We went fishing once, on a Saturday, at a reservoir about 20 minutes from my house. I do not fish regularly, and he does not fish at all, and so we were both learning, which is a better starting point than one person teaching and one person receiving. A man named Gary at the reservoir, who had been fishing there for 30 years, gave Wyatt an unsolicited lesson on the correct way to hold the rod, which Wyatt absorbed with the specific seriousness he brings to information he considers useful. We caught nothing. We were there for 4 hours, and we went home with an empty bucket and 2 sandwiches we had brought and not eaten. Wyatt said, "We should probably do this again." "Yes," I said. "We probably should." Callie completed the outpatient program in 8 weeks. She transitioned to a continuing care group that meets twice a week. She has her son back. She has, I would say cautiously, her footing back, the quality of someone standing on ground they are still testing but are no longer falling through. She and I talk on the phone every week. This is new and somewhat strange, and sometimes the calls last 3 minutes, and sometimes they last 40. We have not yet talked, at any length, about the 19 years. I think we will. I think we need to. I am not certain either of us is ready. I went back to Elizabethtown in June. Callie made dinner. Wyatt showed me his science project, which he had received a B+ on, which he considered an injustice that we discussed at some length. After dinner, the 3 of us sat on the small balcony off the living room and watched the evening come in over the parking lot, which is not the most scenic view but had the particular quality of an ordinary summer evening that is ordinary because everyone in it is all right, and that ordinariness feels like something worth noticing. I want to tell you about the legal pad. When Wyatt was at my house in Louisville, I noticed him looking at it again one morning. He was standing at the kitchen counter eating oatmeal and reading the list the way you read something you're trying to memorize. I picked up a pencil. He watched me. I added a name at the bottom of the list, the 48th name. Wyatt read it. He said, "That's not a kid you removed." "No," I said. "It's not." He thought about this. "Is it my mom's name?" he said. "Yes," I said. He nodded slowly. He ate his oatmeal. After a moment, he said, "Why did you write her name on the list?" I thought about how to answer that. "Because she was a child I should have helped a long time ago," I said. "And the list is where I keep the names of children I didn't forget." He looked at the list. "You should probably put my name on there too," he said. I said, "Your name is already there." He looked at me. I showed him where. There is a question I get sometimes from people who hear this story. Would you have gone if Wyatt hadn't written? If the letter had never come? I have been honest about the fact that I drove past her address twice and didn't stop. I have told you about the 19 years. I have been as honest as I know how to be. The honest answer to that question is, I don't know. I like to think I would have gotten there eventually. I like to think that the accumulation of years and distance and the specific weight of a thing left undone would have brought me to a point where I went, but I also know that people carry things for a very long time without putting them down, and that sometimes they carry them for the rest of their lives. I know that an 11-year-old wrote me a letter in pencil on notebook paper, and that the letter found me in a moment when I was ready to be found, and that I went because he asked me to. And I know that the 48th name on the legal pad is also mine. In a way, I am still figuring out how to say, there are things in this story I did wrong. The distance is the most obvious one. But there are others I am still identifying, and I suspect there are some I won't fully see until more time has passed. What I will say is this. If you are a person who is carrying a distance that has gone on longer than it should have, a person who has driven past and not stopped, who has thought about calling and not called, who knows something is wrong and has not found a way to move toward it, I want to ask you one thing. Not to move toward it today, not to resolve anything, just to ask yourself, is there a version of what is keeping you away that is not wisdom, but fear? And if there is, what would it take to go? Because I drove 4 hours to a door I had no right to knock on. And on the other side of that door was my daughter and her son, who had already done more to save his family than most adults would have known how to do. The door opened. That's all. The door opened. And then the rest of it was just the hard work of being in the room. Leave a comment below. I want to ask you something honest. Is there someone you've kept your distance from because the distance felt like a decision you had made with good reasons, and if you saw what that distance had cost them, would you recognize yourself as someone who had let it go on too long? Both yes and no are honest answers. I'm not asking to judge. And if you know someone who is carrying a distance like this one, someone who has a door they haven't knocked on in a long time, share this with them. Not as a lecture, just as something to sit with. Thank you for listening all the way through. I'll see you next time.